No sex. I'm returning. Okay. During this time of impurity, for physical impurity, the woman is still having some blood appear. There's no sex. There's no touching a holy object, no coming to the sanctuary, etc. And then there's also spiritual impurity, where for a male child, you're spiritually impure for 33 days. For a female child, physically impure for 14 days, and spiritually impure for 66 days. Now, following the habit of Rabbi Glussman to find out a nice doctor to talk to, I talked to an OBGYN. I called Fran Ivker and I said, how about that 7 days for a boy and 14 days for a girl? What do you think? And she said, no difference between boy and girl in terms of bleeding. And that the 7 days is probably wishful thinking, and that it could be anywhere from a week to several weeks that you are physically still showing up with blood. But the spiritual part is different. And again, difference between male and female. But as it turns out, eventually the Kohen and his advisors decide that everything is okay. And at the end of the time of impurity, you make a sacrifice, a 1-year-old lamb for the physical impurity. And you also consider a second offering of a turtle dove or a young pigeon. I had to look this stuff up because I had cesarean sections. None of this applied to me. None of this worked for me. And if you can't afford the lamb, you can double up on the turtle doves and the pigeons. Become pure again. So 9 lines, a minuscule amount on childbirth, purity and impurity. And the major part of the discussion is talking about the impurity that has to do with the leprosy or the Tsar-A'at disease.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I read in Everett Fox that translation is what he goes along with that is that leprosy has been commonly used as the right translation for that, but that is almost certainly that's an erroneous translation. And what he does is he just goes with the Hebrew because he was not able to find any kind of reasonable translation into English as to what that might have been.
That's right. I mean, I think that when I looked at various references, many of them were using the Tsar-A'at name rather than leprosy. And I would have to go back and look exactly what the Parsha says in the Chumash, but I can't talk and do that at the same time, but I'm pretty sure it still at least mentions the leprosy part. So after all, we were raised thinking it was leprosy and still have that. Okay. So
I used to be really interested in leprosy for some, as a teenager for some, bizarre reason. And this, and I'm sure Howard will concur that this really does not conform with leprosy.
I think even back, I'm just thinking the old rabbis, when we would read this, I don't think people have thought this was leprosy for lots of decades. I mean, I think that's been put to bed.
But we're thinking, I mean,
it's something else or whatever, but it's not leprosy.
one Torah study that I went to, we were talking about this and noticing how it also applies to fabric and so on and so forth. And we're thinking that it seemed like some kind of mold.
A fungus, yeah.
Yeah, some kind of fungus or mold or something like that.
No, that's certainly an understanding. And actually, I don't know much about molds and fungi, but I know a lot about skin diseases because I watch TV and there are ads all the time for those white patches. I don't remember what the drug is. the eczema, the psoriasis. I mean, I probably could sit down for 2 hours in an evening and find all the right drugs to use for all of that. I mean,
Oh yeah, I remember those commercials, eczema, seborrhea, and psoriasis.
yeah, it's a real.
You know, they would go to the rabbi. They weren't dermatologists in those days. I guess it was just a generic term. And what did the rabbi know? I mean, Pasteur hadn't even revealed that microorganisms have a say in our health. But yeah,
Even
it's fine with me.
right, Jonathan, here they're talking about going to the Kohen and and how did the Kohen actually know? The Kohen then had his own advisor who would tell him. He had his, specialist.
Yeah, specialist, right?
Yeah, the specialist.
And a referral.
That's
how-
right. And you have to be a higher
That's how we do it. That's how we get everybody's money. And we,
and how your wife gets her fur coats.
right, you got it. Oh, the secret's out now.
Well, the important thing, or the thing about these, are that they're rituals for dealing with this purity, impurity. And when you're in a state of, it's called tuma, the impure state, the connection that's made is that these are bringing you close to death. So if you have the risk of childbirth, the risk of illnesses, you're in this interim between, or this situation between a living world and a spiritual world. And how do you get yourself, or how does the patient get back on track? And as I learned from the TV ads, the white scales, the white patches, the let's see, what else? Well, and as Howard was, or I think Jonathan, you were saying, they didn't know as much about bugs and viruses and things in those days. And now we know that some of them are from this chemical, like, or the white patches. Or I've got patches on my arm for where I tore off the skin and now it's pink. It's not white, it's a different color. So I think that the question of putting people in quarantine or moving them to these camps outside of the state is where we really get to Sacks' discussion about why the power of bad, something bad happened. And we're not talking about bad being the illness. We're talking about, is this a quarantine that's for the good health of the rest of the community? Or is it a punishment for the person who's been afflicted by the disease? Are they being punished because they committed lashon hara?
Well, I mean, clearly Miriam was being punished, right?
Right. And if I can say something about the Miriam situation, we get to the punishment aspect because we get the commandment to remember what God did to Miriam. And she was struck with leprosy, sa'arat. She was struck after speaking badly about Moses. So when you look up, it's we haven't gotten to that part of the story yet. If we're going through the parsha in order, we haven't gotten to this yet. This is not until Numbers. It's in Bamidbar. It's verses 1 through 10. Very interesting. Here's what Sacks says. Miriam's Sara'at was a punishment. And verses 1 through 10, chapter 12 in Bamidbar, verse 1 and verse 10 are the most specific. Aaron and Miriam are talking about Moses because they want to take on some of his power. Why does he have power with the people? Why don't we have power with the people? And in verse 1, Miriam complains about the fact that Moses married Cushite women, either from Nubia, from Ethiopia, dark skin, different. Probably not really complaining about the dark skin. She's probably just complaining about, and she's using that as her excuse to talk about something questionable about Moses. So a cloud appears and God comes in, talks to Aaron and Miriam, and explains that he will talk to any prophet. Miriam's a prophet, but he will communicate. I didn't mean to say talk. He will communicate with prophets in dreams. But Moses is different. He wants to talk to Moses face to face. And he speaks directly to Moses because Moses is his man. Moses is the one that God is working. So angrily, in verse 10, Lord says, how dare they speak against my servant Moses? The cloud goes away and voila, there's Miriam with white scales. So be observant. Don't use Lashon Hara. Don't speak badly of someone, because consider what happened to Miriam. So what is Lashon Hara? I mean, you get to the point where you just call it Lashon Hara, but what is it? Okay,
It's-
definition, Jonathan. What is it?
Well, he put me on the spot, but it's gossiping. I mean, things that may be for the most part true, but it's not for anybody's benefit, and then ultimately it's to bring some shade on the person being discussed. I don't know if that's a very good definition, but that's kind of the way I get it.
Well, malicious speech. Suzanne, what's your?
Well, literally, it's bad. Excuse me, bad speech, and if it's true, it's worse to speak it than if it's not. At least that's what I've heard rabbis say.
But bad. We are forbidden to do it.
Yeah.
We are
For sure.
whether it's true or not. We're forbidden to do it.
So then, I mean, we've had discussions. Sometimes you have to discuss another person. If someone comes for a job interview.
Absolutely. Mhm.
So how do you handle it?
I know how some companies now handle it. They say, I want to ask you about Joe Smith, or we're thinking of hiring Joe Smith. And you can say, yes, Joe Smith worked here from October 2020 to September 2023. End of story. That's
Right.
what,
But that's different because that's protecting the company from liability. That's not worrying about the ethics of the speech.
well,
But
the university doesn't care what it's been about.
right, you're right that's what it's come to these days. But there are, I think, ethics that sometimes it's worse to hint at something about a person than to be specific. So instead of saying, well, he's lazy or something like that, you can say, well, 6 of his reports were not handed in on time.
Mhm.
That was a problem when he worked here. Or,
But-
something very specific, and then let the other person decide is this important in this case or not.
Although it's my impression that isn't it still ritually illegal? It's still Lashon Hara when you're saying something bad about someone, even when it's true. So it does, as Suzanne is saying, it depends on the outcome. The desired outcome is to provide something factual. It's true.
I mean, we had a case here where we got this horrible educational director who came with this was before all this legal stuff, who came with a wonderful recommendation. And we found out the community just wanted to get rid of him without paying. I mean, that was much worse than if they had written a bad and told the truth about him.
Yeah. I agree. So yes, there can be a positive outcome when you're not. And it's funny, Suzanne, your example happened at a synagogue.
Right.
So, yeah, you would expect them to know the rules and regulations and did they respond? No, we didn't tell you that because we didn't want to get into Lashon Hara.
We heard from other people in the community and afterwards.
That's right.
Well, they actually sounded like they actually said good things about him that were lies in order to benefit themselves to get rid of it,
Exactly.
which is not good. I feel like I've committed it. So if we're saying that this is a sin, I had a neighbor that said lies about me to the council, and I wanted to straighten things out. So I made an appointment to come speak to our association and call her out on it. So, but I knew that if she was saying that to one person, she was spreading it, and I was right. So, it just doesn't seem like in all situations you can do the right thing. If the right thing is not to talk bad about somebody, whether it's true or not.
And there's a worse thing than Lashon Hara, right? It's what Hotzat Shemra, I think it's called, where you're just flat out making stuff up and slandering people with no basis in fact whatsoever. I guess
Yeah.
Lashon Hara has you're spinning the truth to the disadvantage of another individual.
Or that could be one case in which it's Lashon Hara, when you have a motive for doing it. And I think we can look at lots of current day examples where people have a motive for speaking badly. And they're fresh in my mind. I knew it was there. I see it all the time. It's on Instagram, on the news, on whatever. Eddie, you're nodding your head. Does an example come to your mind?
I'm not getting into politics at this point.
You don't have to get into politics. There's plenty of other stuff.
But
Let's talk
there's a
science.
former public servant that we all know about.
And is that all you need to say, Jonathan? We're supposed to know exactly what the examples are. That's all you need to say. Yep. Well, let me go to a more recent one. Marjorie Taylor Greene, politician. I agree, not my politician. But where does she get off talking about science? Where does she get her reasoning for talking about earthquakes in New Jersey and eclipses? I mean, and then for her own bias, she said what that slanderous speech, she said what it was meant, what was meant. And I mean, she said the fact that there was a 4.8 magnitude earthquake in New Jersey 4 days before a eclipse, both of which are acts of God. God's telling us something. God's
But-
telling.
Yeah. Well, there are thousands of earthquakes every day in the United States.
Maybe not
On
that
average.
big. Maybe not that
Every
big.
day, yeah. There are 4,000 tremors each day in the United States, and 4.8 is, it'll do this, but that's about all. She's also the one who came up with the Jewish space ray. You all remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Jewish space ray gun. Kind of wish we had
Yeah.
one.
Would you be pointing it at Georgia? But then you look at, what does she mean? What is she do? Why is she doing that? Why is she doing that? Margaret, were you going to say something before?
Well, I was going to say that I had a conversation with my brother not too long ago, and he was, I don't think his motive was particularly religious or came out of this, but he was saying that that he was really trying not to talk about other people, and he really made it a commitment to try not to talk about other people, that led us into a discussion of when there are a thing that's generally probably a pretty good thing to do, but that led us into a discussion of when it is beneficial to talk about somebody. When that can have a beneficial effect. So I think it's and I don't know, need to replay all the things that we talked about for that, but I think it's really a kind of balancing act between when there's some greater good that is served by talking about other people, even if what you have to say is negative, or whether you just, whether it's meant in a destructive way or simply as simply as an amusement when you finish talking about the weather.
I would absolutely agree with that. When there's a positive outcome, it would be a different story than when you're just, as you said at the end, doing it to have something to talk about. That's a very different situation. TK, you're muted.
So I just would question, is it the positive outcome or is it the intent for a positive outcome that makes a difference?
I think the intent is
Can only be it's a good question. It seems to me it can only be the intent.
no.
I mean, you can't know until you do it.
I also have to say, from my perspective, that blaming bad things, making up your own explanation for why bad things happen to people, the Bible is guilty of that just as well. I mean, saying Miriam got a rash because it's because she said bad things. I mean, if you believe that the Bible is God speaking, then okay, but I think we've been doing this since day one. Is making up events or things, bad things happening or good things happening, and trying to make what we're trying to do is make meaning out of our lives.
and this effort to make meaning sometimes is a little stretched, in my opinion.
I think that would be a good ask the rabbi question to see what his perspective is on that, because when I think about it, I want to jump right to, yeah, but it's because men wrote that. They wrote it because, as you said, they were looking for an explanation of something they didn't understand and it fit. I would be interested to hear what the rabbi had to say in defense of the Bible. That's the way he would think.
Well, everything good that we get out of it, which there is a lot, obviously, or we wouldn't all be sitting here. Everything good that we get out of it is an interpretation that resonates with us in our lives, and we say, yes, that is good. So the fact that someone made up a connection doesn't necessarily mean that the lesson that comes out of it is not worth anything.
But yeah, that's the whole scientific thing, is that, association doesn't equal causation. That you can't just say, well, this happened, here's the result, therefore what happened gave this result. I mean, you have to try to find a way to prove it, or if you can. I mean, otherwise it's just like, well, it may be, that's an obvious result, but that doesn't mean that's the correct result.
I think when we talk about Lashon Hara, we're not thinking about, or sometimes we don't think and recognize that words are like weapons. You can be stabbing somebody with bad words. Or the same thing, who gets hurt with Lashon Hara? The person who is being spoken about gets hurt, and that hurt is going to stick around for a long time because you don't forget that kind. And that hurt can travel long distances because I call someone, they call someone, and it ends up passed on. And so it's the speaker that gets hurt, the person hearing it is hurt because it's then in their mind, the person they're talking about gets hurt. And there's a really nice old rabbi story about a man goes to the rabbi because he's spoken Lashon Hara and he wants to know, how do I get back to being pure? How do I get back to being good? And the rabbi said, okay, take this feather pillow and go outside, and Jonathan's heard the story and so have you, and scatter the feathers, open it and scatter the feathers. The guy goes out, nice windy day, has no trouble scattering the feathers, comes back, says to the rabbi, good, I'm done, I did it. And the rabbi says, not yet, you're not fine yet. Now, what's the punchline? Go back, collect all those feathers, and bring them back. And that's the effect of Lashon Hara. That's the effect of Lashon Hara.
The cat's out of the bag, or we can say the feathers are out of the pillow. Too late.
I was thinking of old
sticks and stones will break my bones.
Howard, thank you. You must have seen my notes because that was next on the list. Did you tell your little kid patients sticks and stones will hurt?
I never said that, but I heard it a lot growing up. I'll tell you that.
What's the second part of it? Sticks and stones may break my bones.
My bones, but
words will
never hurt
me.
Yeah, words.
That's not true.
Words and faces or something like that. Names, words, faces, whatever it is, will never. That's an old one. That is even from before the time when Howard was a kid. That I looked it up. That was done in 1860s. The sticks and stones phrase came out in the 1860s, and even then it was used to help children get through bullying exercises, get through bullying situations. Now, I think we have a slightly different idea of how to deal with bullying nowadays. Margaret, any advice on how kids should be dealing with bullying?
I'm rubber, you're glue, whatever he bounces off of me and sticks to you.
Oh, you.
Oh, very good. Very good. But Rabbi Sacks spends a fair amount of time talking about the negative effect of Lashon Hara on, I think he uses the ages 15 to 18 or 10 to 18, something like that, teenage ages. So, he gives numbers on their numbers from the United Kingdom, but he gives numbers on the effect that this type of verbal bullying has on students. What would it be like if you could control Lashon Hara? If there was no Lashon Hara, where would we see a difference? Where would we see a difference?
A lot of silence.
I was just gonna say, it would be very quiet.
The sound of silence.
And I'm on Rabbi Sacks' boat with this. I agree with him. Here's a case where social media, 24-hour television, all of that is guilty, guilty, guilty. It's really a problem. It's really a problem. It's too easy. When you're talking about social media, I can post anything about anyone. Or it's too easy or it's too easy to use when it's a situation where you need to fill another 20 hours of television time and you have to talk about something. So I hear all this scoop, all this bad stuff about Taylor Swift and her boyfriend, or, we're breaking up because I saw him with some other person. It's Lashon Hara. It would be different. It would be different. So if we didn't have any Lashon Hara, maybe it would be a lot quieter. Maybe it would be a lot quieter, but that would give us time to do something else. What could we do about that?
Talk sports.
What did you
What
say?
you- I didn't hear it either.
Oh,
Talk sports.
Watch
Talk
sports.
Talk sports is what he said. Talk sports.
Sports.
okay. Talk sports.
Well, yeah, I mean, you asked my opinion, and I said something that was kind of flip and funny, but it really is very concerning what's happening to teenagers and the the things that are being posted, and especially more recently with AI, the sexual things that are being posted about mostly about girls, and the number of kids that are really have been badly hurt, and even some driven to the point of suicide by these by the stuff that is going on. So it's, I think Sacks is right. I think that things are, with the ease and spread of information, it really makes it much harder and to control, and hard to teach kids to be more resilient in the face of these kinds of, which is a good, I mean, in the long run, that's probably a good lesson for kids, is to be more resilient in the face of injury, but it's not something that can happen overnight.
Which one could society do more easily? Teach resilience or control Lashon Hara?
Whoa, I think teach resilience Can you
That's
hear
your-
me?
Yeah, that's your,
Yeah, I agree.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's resilience. Mhm.
I agree. I think, as you say, it's just far too easy to weaponize, and it's about power. The young kids that are doing this are doing it because they can, because it gives them a sense of being powerful and affecting things. Whereas it's much, much harder for the victims to be able to turn around and learn to stand up under this.
Um,
Yeah.
I agree. I think resilience is the only way at this point to deal with it, teaching resilience, because you look at groups of people who might jump in with, okay, you said something about bad about so and so, and I agree, they also XYZ. And that person who joins in probably doesn't want to be excluded, because they know if they were excluded, then they would be the victim, or they would be the focus for the next negative thing. So a more resilient person wouldn't need to jump on with that. So put that in the lesson plan. Teach our kids resilience.
Then the question is, how do you teach them resilience? Do you teach them to say that, the ditty about being a rubber ball, or what are there specific ways to teach resilience?
I think if they have more self-confidence and a better understanding of who they are and what they could be, it might help. But yeah, that's something maybe people, Jonathan, education, any background, anything to contribute for that? I mean,
Well, I've been thinking, I used to teach to my upper level French students, the AP students. We would read Jean-Paul Sartre's Huis clos, which translates as no exit, and it really is about his whole, philosophy, existentialist philosophy, that we are nothing but the sum of our actions. There is no pre-existing essence. Our existence depends on the choices we make, and our actions create the person that we are, for better or for worse. And, it was interesting. We got down to, well, are words actions? And of course, I believe they are. I know they are. But the students were thinking, well, not really. I said, well, why is Sartre using the written word to get this across? I mean, this is an action, right? I mean, come on. And so it was interesting how some of them. So I saw some people every year. Some eyes would kind of get a little bit wider and say, "Oh, yeah." And you can't say, for example, if you insult somebody, kind of, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that." Yes, you did. Yes, you did. And I think it's this. It's a lie to say that. So we always had great discussions about words, being actions and being very, very powerful tools, or in some cases weapons.
well, one thing I think that Rabbi Sacks touches on is how do you deal with Lashon Hara today? How should we deal? How could we deal with Lashon Hara today? And if we're thinking of the idea of the white patches on the skin or the scales and everything, he said they do two things. It publicly identifies people who have done this wrong, and because they can then be publicly identified, which you can't do with the social media as easily, they can be excluded. They can be moved away from. So it is the additional punishment, even though we're not putting people in isolation anymore for skin diseases. But
Well,
Suzanne,
we sort of do that. In fact, there's an article in the New York Times today about doxing, and this woman was talking about how she, she felt very bad for the Israeli hostages. But now after all what happened in Gaza, she's very angry, and she took down one of the posters for the hostages, and someone took a picture of it, and then they identified her, and they published her address and her name, and they got death threats. And here
Lost her job.
she lost her job, and all she did was take down a poster. She expressed how she felt about something. So was that, I mean, who decides what's bad speech? Or
Yeah, that's, back to the sort of Sartrean idea about that. I mean, let's see. We are responsible for our actions, for better, for worse. You can say what you want to say, but people are going to react the way they're going to react. I'm not condemning or supporting this woman. I'm just saying that, you have to be, that's the whole idea of authenticity, is being responsible for things. That's called being authentic. You say, I did this, I meant to, sorry you don't like it, but that's the way I feel.
right, but
I
does
don't
someone
think,
else have the right to destroy your life because of it?
well, there are other cases where we punish in a different way, where we punish by fining people. And I hate to talk politics. This isn't politics. This is slandering someone. If you go to the $83.3 million that E. Jean Carroll, the journalist, won for in their court case because of going after Donald Trump because of an attack in a dressing room in the department store. And his comment about it was, I didn't do that. She's not my type anyway. She's this, she's that. And it really was slander against her character and took away, or it affected her ability to do her job, where he's there denying that the sexual assault ever happened and denied ever meeting her, etc. It hurt her reputation. The court agreed. She got threats from his fans, for want of a better term, threats of rape, threats of murder, etc. And the court decided $83.3 million as a punishment. Well, it's one way that we've dealt, or that society can deal with this lashon hara, which is detrimental to our social fabric. It breaks us up. It doesn't keep us as a community. And one that I'm sure happens fairly often is ridicule of people who are making comments, making things. I honestly think you can all turn me in for it, but I think Marjorie Taylor Greene is ridiculous. So, report me to whoever you're reporting me to, but it's one way, not through the court system, that we've dealt with it. But in the Israel-Hamas war, Hamas put out pictures of their people in hospitals, just in terrible shape and everything, and look what the Israelis did to them. And it turns out that some of the things that they were posting dated from, well, they had one particular one where they tried to say that this guy was in the hospital and then he had a miraculously recovery, and they showed pictures of him walking down the street and working with children and everything. Well, it turns out that it was two different men. I mean, it was totally a fake story. And there's so many of these fake stories that become Lashon Hara when they have a malicious intent. And the malicious intent was an anti-Israeli intent, and get it out into the news and get it out on social media and be liked by 300,000 people. And you can't do anything about that, because when you try to shut down areas of social media, then you get into the free speech rules here in the States. And other countries probably don't even have the same level of court system for that we have.
But I think I understand that in Islam, it's okay to bear false witness against a non-Muslim. It's okay to lie to a non-Muslim. So with that in mind, we should never believe anything that Hamas or any other jihadist organization has to say. Sorry for getting political, but just wanted to share that.
I wasn't aware of that ability to do falsehood.
Are you sure about that? It doesn't seem right.
I've heard
It doesn't
that.
seem right, but I'll tell you that my wife, Tammy, whom you know, her son is a Muslim. And Tammy is, I think, read the whole Quran and the other, sort of accompanying scriptures. And yeah, that's I learned that from her. So
Wow.
I'll double check, but yeah, I think she said it's considered okay if you're telling a lie to a non-Muslim for your own protection or protection of other Muslims, and that's okay. That's allowed.
Wow.
All right, I'm reading now. I haven't resourced this, but it looks like it is a Muslim, Islamic site talking about deception and lying and something called taqiyya. It says there are several forms of lying to non-believers that are permitted under certain circumstances. The circumstances are typically those that advance the cause of Islam, in some cases by gaining the trust of non-believers in order to draw out their vulnerability and defeat them.
There you go.
Wow.
Very good. And that takes us to changing someone's mind in a negative way by using the words. And that's one thing I think that's always important to look at. What is the motivation? Anti-US, anti-this, anti-Israel, anti-whatever. And I really think that that's where Sacks has pulled it all together by saying the power of bad, because somebody get, where is it? What is his life-changing lesson from this one? Anyone have their book? A life-changing lesson from this one.
Right here.
The way we use words shapes our social environment.
Right. The power of bad. So our bad use of words, and we're not talking about grammar. We're talking about our Lashon Hara, the way we use words shapes the environment, shapes our social environment. And
he did a lot of talking about the positive power of words that we haven't talked about. If I read the right section, he talked about praising someone who's, if you're in a relationship. Am I right? Did I read the right thing?
it's not fresh in my mind that he spent much time talking about that in this one.
Maybe I read the wrong piece.
Oh, you're right. You read, well, there are two. Sometimes these are given together depending on how many, parshas are done, but this is a parsha. The power of bad is Tatzriya, and the power of praise is Metzora. And often, some weeks, Tashriya and Metzora are done together.
Okay, I read the wrong one. I read the power of praise.
Well,
but it is related because
yes,
obviously.
it is true. Maybe the rabbi said that we were to do both of them, and maybe I just
No, this
did
is
half the
me.
homework. I think
I'm
happened.
sure it's me.
Well, you're ahead of us then for the for the next one. And I think what he doesn't go on to say, well, here he does say, speaking negatively about others harms them, harms us, and damages the delicate strands of relationship that are our common life, bring us together. So God wants us to be at our best, not speaking Lashon Hara, so that we can live in our best community, our best society. And without Lashon Hara, we end up creating a better society. And we should think, what am I doing to further the goals of our social environment? What am I doing in my relationship to my words with other people?
Right. We have to always
Tina?
respect the power of our words, our power of our words to do good, to create. I mean, I always love the term abracadabra, which means I create as I speak. There's nothing really magical about that, because we create as we speak all the time, and we can destroy as we speak too.
I love that, Jonathan. What was the Hebrew again?
Actually, I think it's Aramaic. Abracadabra. I'm not sure. I think that's an Aramaic word. Abracadabra. Somebody check me on that though.
I'll look it up. And I also love what you said about that we create ourselves by our actions. And I think in words are actions. And maybe going back to the question about how do we make ourselves and our children resilient, it's about the words that we say to ourselves, who we are.
Yeah, I got a really good lesson when I was in the 6th grade. There was this girl who was really smart, and I was kind of jealous of her. And I just said to her one day, you know something, I can't stand you. And she looked at me and she says, I'm sorry you feel that way. And just such a mature response. And I was just, I was like, I was what? And that taught me one of the greatest lessons I've ever learned. I said, you know something, that's the way to be. That she just showed you how to be.
What did you think she was going to say?
Nanny boo boo, of course.
I thought she'd, say something. I was trying to,
Like, I don't like you either.
Yeah. Well, like you, yeah, I was expecting, at least for her to return volley, but she sounded like something my parents might say. Well, I'm sorry you feel that way.
But you were a 6th grade boy. You were probably flirting with her, and she just.
Oh, well, probably yeah, at some level. She was kind of cute, but she was also taller than me. At that age, the girls are taller. So she was taller and smarter, and I was kind of threatened. So I had to kind of.
Ellen, you want to say something, but we can't hear you.
I know, I'm fooling with my mute.
And now we can hear you.
Now you can hear me. I was just going to step backwards for a moment to say that this conversation brings up the most important problems that I have watched in these last years, maybe 2, maybe 3, but it's all girls. It's all the years that they are leaving high school, entering college, and none of these people live in Birmingham, but they are children of close friends I've made in other parts of America. And one of them, it's just exactly what we've been going over here. What is said about people, how it is said, how it is received, what can we do? And from looking at these three cases, I would say that the most important thing that has, thank God, been in place for each of these three lovely young girls, all bright, all with futures that couldn't be anything but good, talented and wise, but they just crumbled and could not enter. Two of them could not. One went to orientation and just had to leave. Another one stayed for a month or two and couldn't handle it. These are girls at the top of their classes. You know, there's nothing they lacked. Friends, boyfriends, the good grades, sports, arts, everything.
Are you
But
talking about being bullied on social media? I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm talking about what can we do when, yes, a lot of it was connected in one way or another to people who were talking about them or treating them as though it didn't matter what we say here, nobody else is listening. It was devastating, truly devastating. Each of them is better, but two of them are still not in school. And, you know, I look at the total picture, and the only really strong thing, which reminds me of what we can do, is all three sets of parents stepped back from what they had planned to do with their lives and have dealt with each of these children, each of these young women, by abandoning what they thought was absolutely what they were going to do for themselves. What the most important thing we can do for young people like this is to be present when they need us.
Ellen, are you talking at all about the about the sorority system at the University of Alabama? That's
No, I'm not. I'm not in Alabama. I'm in Washington. I'm in Dayton, Ohio. I'm in, three different places.
okay.
It's
I understood
not-
that they were coming from different places, but I thought they were coming here to Birmingham.
Alabama is certainly a problem for me growing up. And I think some of it sticks with me. You know, I'm a little wary when I'm meeting someone new. Where's this person coming from? But no, this is everywhere. It's something I learned about parenting from my daughter, from all of these other mothers late. I was just lucky that all of this had not broken during the period that I was raising children and thinking I needed to do this or I want to do that, or how much pleasure this is, they'll be okay by themselves. I don't see my daughter taking that same stance.
Hopefully, you've contributed to our learning today and our perspective on the power of bad and what we ourselves are able to do for the people we come in contact with, our society, our local society, our families, and our ability to encourage anyone else to be strong in the face of whatever words and names and glue might be coming at you. I appreciate everyone coming today.
Thanks, Barbara, for
If there's anything anyone wants to bring up with the rabbi, I won't feel badly that I missed that point or that you disagreed with me, no problem. And please, as the rabbi wrote, he gave us 2 dates that he's not going to, or that he will be out again. And anyone who would like to lead all or part, please do. I'm willing to lead. I really need the salary for leading. I'm getting, that's helping me a lot. We're getting food on the table because I get such a wealth of dollars for this. No, really. I love seeing you all, and I love having class with you and learning with you, because we have such a diversity of backgrounds that there's a lot to be gained. So the social fabric of this class works great, and I really appreciate all of our.
Thank you. Could I share one thing real quickly about abracadabra? Okay, so it's in Hebrew, it means I will create as I speak. It was first published in the 2nd century by Serena Simonicus as a cure for fever known today as malaria. That's very interesting. It brings us full circle back to the ailments of that can be.
But isn't that where abracadabra came from?
Yeah, abracadabra is abracadabra. Yeah, yeah. It means I will create as I speak, and it was used as a cure for malaria. If you get malaria, say that, maybe it'll work. Y'all have a good one.
Sure, someone will pay for it.
Barbara. Thank you, Barbara. It was a good-
Barbara, thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you. Have a good week, Ellen. Take care, Laura.
Thank you. Now I can't say goodbye. I can't get in and I can't get out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I can't get out either. Oh, I got it.
Voila.